Whoa, whoa. We are back for a second episode of Never Blessed. A few more people have submitted their stories of, their experiences with manipulative wellness, and that is what we are talking about here for this content. The whole point of Never Blessed is to help educate as well as to validate people who have been through similar experiences. Manipulative wellness is essentially where you are given a guarantee that as long as you give this type of money or this much money, if you give this volunteer time, if you live this lifestyle, if you commit to this group, that you will receive this blessing. And what we're looking for essentially is, what was your blessing? What actually happened when you pursued it? And then what helped you recover from that experience? So we've got a couple more submissions that came in that I am excited to go over. Like I said, we've got that 3-part format that we're looking for. And essentially, at the end of the day, the hope is that this will be a resource, maybe for a few people, maybe many people. You never know with the internet. But I am so very grateful to those of you who have decided to be vulnerable with your story and in the pursuit of sharing. I mean, historically, stories are how we help keep each other safe, inspire each other, validate each other. That's something that I am very passionate about. I think it's just the coolest thing ever. So I just wanted to open up my platform, at least for a little bit. I have no idea how far this project is going to go, but I just wanted to give the opportunity for those in my audience to have a moment on my platform to share things that they've experienced that might be validating or helpful in regards to their own experience with manipulative wellness. I myself was raised within an environment that was all about wellness. I was raised with a church that had a health message. The impact it actually had on my life was not a very positive one overall. So the goal of this is hopefully just to help those transitioning out, or possibly even help prevent somebody from falling into that type of organization in the future, and like giving you tools to notice what to be on guard for, what it looks like when you're inside it, the ways that they try to keep you there, the way that like you can be basically driven into the ground, labor-wise, finances-wise, emotions-wise, and what can actually happen to your health. Because at the end of the day, there is no guarantee for wellness. We are very vulnerable little globs of goop that are piloting this meat suit, and that meat suit is sitting on a rock that's hurtling through space. So technically speaking, there really isn't any way to guarantee wellness for us. You could just get hit by a meteor out of nowhere. You could be praying every day, multiple hours a day for your entire life and still get hit by a meteor. I mean, that one's not very likely, but there's any number of things that could happen to you regardless of whatever personal superstition that you have, whatever type of lifestyle, whatever type of routine. It could still be taken completely sideways, and then you can experience some trauma, things like that. So we're also looking for stories where you could have been taken absolutely sideways. You believed that the way that you were living would protect you, and then it didn't, and that like disillusioned you from that experience. That is entirely possible. But we're going to jump to our first submission here, which is from Melody. So Melody has sent me, hello Rosie. Hi Melody. For your Never Blessed project, thank you very much. A little parentheses, not sure if I'm supposed to send this in DM and the Quartz Cast discussion, or supposed to pick one, send both. Just to be safe. Well, honestly, it could be either one. For those of you who are thinking about sending me a submission as well, Discord or my email is kind of like some of the best way to do it, because it can be a chunk of text. So you can either send it as a Discord DM. You could send it in the House of Quartz Discord server. We have a Never Blessed section ready to go where you can share it there, or you can just send it to my email, which is rosiequartzofficial@gmail.com. Okay, so Melody starts out with the promise. I was promised that if I was a pure, good Christian woman who spread the word of God to non-believers, that basically I would never be alone, because Jesus would always walk with me. As a chronically alone autistic who took that literally, this spurned me on the most, and God would reward me in heaven. And okay, the way that this hit though, because unfortunately with a lot of theological rhetoric where they push things like reach out to others, go to the non-believers, give us your tithe, all of this stuff, and Jesus will walk alongside you. What the message I grew up with is that everybody has a hole in their heart. Everybody feels empty inside, and Jesus helps fill the void. My personal theory now as an adult is that that void is probably stuff like depression, anxiety, or loneliness that could be more effectively addressed with therapy, healthy community, getting supports, things like that. And like in this case, where if you are like chronically alone, autistic, like the way that this can literally target you. A lot of theology is something that specifically targets emotionally vulnerable people. And you'll notice this. You'll notice this in like the sermons and in fundamentalist Christian community, where they will emphasize like the secular people are unhappy, the wealthy people are unhappy, and by wealthy I mean probably like mid to upper middle class, not like billionaires. But they essentially look at people who are self-sufficient outside the church and say, you know, they look like they have their life together, but they're probably empty inside and they need Jesus and we pity them. It's a complete and utter assumption of somebody else's lived experience, but they are the out group, you're the in group, and so there's really no input from the out group as to what their actual experience is. So at least for myself, what was part of what brought me to a place of disillusionment with Christianity was I actually worked in Beijing for a summer doing childcare with secular families. And I remember being like, you know what, they seem fine. They actually seem like they're doing okay. Like the way that like you start interacting with the out group and you start to realize that this severe discrepancy isn't actually there, that they're literally just normal people living their life and passing away. And they're not in this, you essentially learn that most secular people are not in a state of existential despair. And instead you find out that the evangelical targeting was specifically towards people who are vulnerable due to executive dysfunction, due to poverty, due to any number of factors, really, prior trauma. So if you're feeling like a sense of being empty inside, that literally could be the result of trauma that could be addressed through therapy, but instead you find yourself drawn into the in-group community of a church. And there's also the part where it's like took it literally. That resonates with me so much because I grew up in it. So I did take all of it very, very literally. And especially the parts where they were like, the world is going to burn and you're all going to go to, like, people are going to be like judged and burned alive, and the government's going to hunt us down for our beliefs. Like all of it I took very literally from a very young age. The theology aspect of it, the relationship aspect of it. I remember like, because I've always been uncomfortable with the whole like relationship with Jesus, because I mean, like, first of all, it never felt like it was my culture. And second of all, I'm like, Jesus is like this 30-year-old, thousands-year-old deity. I don't really want a relationship with this man. I don't have an interest in like, I'm 8 and he's a grown up. I don't really want an interpersonal relationship with a grown ass man. I think there is something to be said for how teaching young kids to have a fictional relationship with a grown man that is outside of their parents does set kids up to trust people in the church who are representing Jesus to them, like the youth leader, their Sabbath school teachers, the pastor. Like it tends to like build this association between the two, where like if Jesus is trustworthy as a grown-ass man, then the pastor must be, the youth pastor must be, my Sabbath school teacher must be, the elder, the deacon must be. And I think that sets kids up for some very unsafe situations. Back to Melody's story. So the impact of this was extremely slow. That's fair. Like this stuff can happen over years. My school was a cult. So among the spiritual control, there was educational control. Been there, done that. Private Christian education is a trip. I'm still learning basic science and history, and I enter my 20s with no critical thinking skills. Like same though. Unfortunately, like the emphasis for my education was creationism. I didn't learn a lot of the basics of stuff. I think math in particular, I'll probably go the rest of my life not ever having caught up fully on like math basics. So go on to say, mentally, I am unwell and I have the whole alphabet of mental disorders. I would prefer to keep them to myself. However, I'm happy to tell you that I have internalized homophobia and transphobia that I'm still trying to unlearn. And, that's fair. That can take a hot second. Coming out of Adventism in particular, like homophobia and internalized homophobia and transphobia was something that I had to work through, like not from a place of maliciousness, at least for myself, but rather it's just like when you are socialized to perceive something as being wrong, then you'll speak to it being wrong. You'll think you're being kind, you think you're being loving, that you're saving people. However, you kind of just end up later on in life being like, I am so sorry for the things I said when I was an evangelical. And it definitely did take a little bit of time to let those perspectives and biases like phase out as you take in new information. And that's part of like the whole like in-group versus out-group thing, is that when you're in the in-group, you're not taking in new information. You're taking in information that confirms your belief, but you're not really taking in anything that would help you perceive the situation outside of that. I think like as a spice merchant, a side quest giver, the version of that type of dissonance happens with us in general society, because a lot of people view the type of work that I do from like a CSI Miami type of thing. They hear about spice work and they just hear like the yow or what was the other one? The dedicated squad of detectives. These are their stories. Dun dun. Like most people tend to view through that lens and thinking that to be in that type of work, it breaks you down over time. Societally, the bias sure can, but actually most people who work in that field for a long time they have a very well established sense of self and a strong set of boundaries, because you can't survive otherwise unless you are fully present and actively taking care of yourself by setting boundaries. So most, like a lot of spicy people, they are fully present, fully with it, always learning. Like the whole idea of being used up just does not apply, but most people are not taking that information because they're not talking to that demographic. And when you're coming out of like a fundy demographic, you're not talking to other demographics. You are talking at them, but you're not talking to them. You're not talking collaboratively. You're not talking to learn. You're talking to speak down to them, but with a tone of kindness that at least like you perceive as kindness. They just perceive as you being arrogant. Let's see. So Melody says, my deconstruction has looked like becoming a practicing witch. Okay, same. I absolutely did. Like when I first started making TikToks, I was in what was called like #witchtalk, watching Hank and John Green's crash course. Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like a really great resource for like starting to catch up on like the basic science information. Also, I mean, Hank and John Green are just like good vibes all around. Educating myself on Judaism and Islam, accepting that I'm gender fluid and pansexual, and also becoming a Shrek's worker. Okay, so also within that realm. And also acknowledging my body is disabled and I have to take care of its needs. That one can be so tough. Coming to terms with a disability and allowing your body the space and care that it needs can be so tough, because like we're taught right down to our core that our worth is our productivity, what we can do for others, and a disability rips that sense of identity away, and you have to come up with like a new sense of self. So my mantra for healing has been, we are not Catholic in this house, self-punishment isn't holy, and suffering isn't righteous. Okay, I love that. I absolutely love that. We're not Catholic in this house, self-punishment isn't holy, and suffering isn't righteous. And I think for some people, it becomes part of their identity, how much they can take. And when you combine that with Christianity, which teaches you to be like self-sacrificial, I think you get just like in this cycle of loss of pleasure, loss of self, loss of having your needs met, but you're proud of yourself for being able to take it. All right, and we have a second story today, which was submitted by Jay to our House of Quartz Discord server under the Never Blessed submissions. So Jay says, I have been thinking about this for a while. Also, thank you, Melody, for the contribution. It is so very appreciated. So second story, I wanted to contribute because honestly, watching Rosie on TikTok and Insta has been such an impact on my healing journey. The problem is that I have no idea of where to start. My experience with toxic Christianity was a slow progression from bad to worse. From mild Free Will Baptists to Pentecostals to Southern Baptist Christianity to fundamentalism, my parents dragged us from church to church growing up, all searching for more and more control, more and more isolation, and more justification for their own behavior, using the morality of Christianity to justify the years of narcissistic emotional abuse and growing physical control that escalated into physical violence and threats that was all too tied up with the growing cult-like mentality as we went deeper into a more fundamental Christianity. Although I could probably go a little too long about everything I experienced, there's 3 things I'd like to share that I think illustrate the point that Rosie is trying to share with others. My goodness, I've actually had a couple of friends, like my experience with fundamentalist religion kind of like stayed within the church, but I've had a few friends that like their parents would like phase through places. They go through churches, they go through smaller in-home groups, and they would just keep going from place to place trying to find the right spot that completely confirmed and supported and allowed them control in the way that they wanted. My first experience with the contrast of what was promised and what was the reality was when I was 10. I was not a normal child, and I began therapy at 6 years old, as well as a series of testing to diagnose what was wrong with me. ADHD and the potential of Asperger's, that would have been a thing, right, when they, that's what it was called. Depression, easily diagnosed, since my family home was filled with frequent flights. My dad leaving with vague threats. Fear was all I knew. Church began at the same time. My parents were not subtle in suggesting that if I just got saved and was a good Christian young girl, that maybe I would be normal and that I would behave and listen. This was quickly escalated in the church when my questioning and speed of grasping concepts, as well as contradictions, brought the ire of not 1 but 2 pastors. Oh my goodness. No, and I can very much relate to that sense of like not being a normal child, but I was very well behaved. I kind of went the route of like going internal rather than external, so I didn't have much of a personality when I was a child, at least not an overt one. I had a very real, very vivid inner life, but I kind of learned, because you're saying like you brought down the ire of the pastors, and like I learned that externalized behavior would bring down a response, and that it was just easier to exist internally and in books. Despite doing everything I was told, eagerly spreading the gospel through bracelets. Oh, you guys had bracelets. The one I grew up in, like it was always no jewelry. Trying to behave and listen, I was unsurprisingly not fixed to being normal, and my anger issues episodes actually got worse as the church preached against medication for mental disorders because it's all in your head. And if you're just a good enough Christian, you wouldn't need any help. Finally, the pastor called my parents to their house with me. Thereafter, oh no, please don't tell me this is going. Please don't be going where I think you're going. Oh my God, my heart will absolutely break if I think that this is going where I think it's going. Thereafter, a heartfelt speech of how the power of Christ should work, he told my parents that he truly believed that I falsely confessed because I was possessed of a demon. Yep, it went exactly where I hoped it wouldn't. He recommended that I be put in a mental hospital because he truly believed that my case was so bad, not even an exorcism could rid the demon that possessed me. But he would offer to bring me to a spiritual healing with the elders before they sent me away. But he looked at me and said that unless I went away, I would only bring disaster and ruin to my family. What a fucked up thing to tell a kid. The way that I would throw hands on site in the back of a Denny's parking lot with this pastor in Minecraft for legal reasons in Minecraft. That statement still haunts me. No fucking shit. Like, what a way to just like, you've got a kid, and instead of supporting them, instead of digging to the root of the problem, you decide to literally break their identity and tell them that they are inherently bad. That's not something that is ever appropriate to tell a kid, but unfortunately it is very, very common in these types of scenarios for that to happen. I still struggle with that memory and that belief that I am a curse or a demon that can only bring ruin to anyone I'm close to. But it did continue throughout my experience in Christianity. And now you see, like, when I was going through my own process of leaving Adventism, cutting contact with my family, I was making witchy content. I definitely got the message, but as an adult, that I was leading people astray. And there's still kind of that perception of like, I've been led astray, there's demonic influence, things like that, which as an adult, I lean into. As an adult, I'm like, yeah, that's a flex. That's fun. Like, we're working with working with demons. I mean, it's a fun little mental LARP to play with, but like the reality that I have in my brain is there's no demons. It's fun to like lean into it. However, that's literally just like not a reality. The second promise was that I would be given a purpose, that I had a destined role. This is triggering a core memory for me. All of those sermons about like your spiritual gifts, you'd be told like you've got the gift of prophecy, gift of hospitality, gift of service, gift of being a minister, that sort of thing. But as female assigned at birth who struggled with mental health issues as well as neurodiversity, I was told time and time that purpose was blind obedience to my parents, followed by a man, and that because of my limitations and inability to do things normally, I was also told that I couldn't do anything, that I wasn't deserving of a purpose. And I'm not even remotely surprised. That's one of the things that they do to you, is they kind of like keep you off balance with conflicting messages. My second year of Bible college, I was in fact told that they would allow me to return to finish my spring semester after winter break, because they truly believed that I wasn't dedicated enough and couldn't be used by God. In fact, they weren't even sure if my earnest belief was true because I displayed an abnormal lack of interest in godly men. I didn't know the term ace then. You know what? But like, shout out to like the ace spectrum for coming through and saving you from that bullet. My last experience was in the most fundamental place we went through, was the promise of deeper peace, safety, and fulfillment if I dedicated myself to service. During our time there, I had become the primary caretaker of my mom's mother, who had Alzheimer's. Kind of funny how like you suddenly have a purpose when it comes to free labor. The emotional abuse and extreme control had gotten steadily worse as I stopped being an easily controlled child to an adult. But when my maternal grandmother was added to the household, the abuse spread and became physical. Well, yeah, you're probably looking at generational trauma and bringing one of the generations into the living situation. I did my best, but I was one person and very much a victim, as well as very, very scared for my own safety, as they started taking away food and basic necessities from me in an effort to control me. I think it goes without saying that is just beyond fucked up. But also, like, I've been in situations myself where, like, food and housing was used to control me, like the whole like we're gonna give it and take it away, like that's part of reinforcement, right? Positive and negative reinforcement, where you apply positive reinforcement or you withdraw it in order to like keep people off balance, keep them in a fearful state, and literally control them by taking away anything from just positive affirmation to basic necessities. I was granted temporary safety in the dorms as a student, but as soon as I was no longer a student, I was back home. I was promised that the pastor was a safe place, that God could work miracles through his servants, that the community cared. Yet despite writing pleas, making frantic, panicked phone calls, showing up with bruises from defending a grandmother, all I was given was that I just needed to pray my way through it. And if anything, if there's any kind of an experience I think that would disillusion somebody, it would be this. It only stopped when my maternal grandmother passed away and I was so physically depleted, so weak from chronic illness, partially caused by stress, valid, as well as lack of food, basic physical care, that I was bedridden for 3 years. Oh my God. It started again when my dad's mom, who had Alzheimer's as well. Everything that happened the first time was repeated but worse. More than once, I had to call the cops. Jesus Christ, the way that I wish I literally could like step back in time in your life and literally just like scoop you up right out of there. Like I literally wish, like this is something I wish for myself as well, honestly, like literally step back in time and be like, yoink. Yet despite everything, all I was given was you just have to pray through it and make sure you're not discouraged. All will work out. And it never does it? They knew about the abuse. They never reported it, never ever offered to help me get out or help to get innocent elders aid, never confronted the abusers. They promised peace and Christian love, but indicated that it was my lack of prayers/faith that was the root of all the abuse. Yeah, you notice how like they put the responsibility back on you, like a little bit of like this that gaslighting of it's your fault you're being treated this way and you're not trying hard enough, when quite frankly the fact of the matter is no one ever fucking deserves to be treated that way. But indicated was my lack of prayers/faith that was the root of all the abuse, that if I was just better, it would all just stop by magic. You notice how like, yeah, it's the lack of practical intervention, because a lot of the time with ministers and pastors, they'll cosplay like a social worker without having any practical intervention behind it. They'll show up, they'll provide support, spiritual support, but that doesn't actually do anything practical for anybody, and it doesn't actually change the situation positively because there's a lack of practical care. And that's the thing, is like, to me, I call it a cosplay. I think it's cosplaying ministry most of the time, because you don't actually have to put in any hard work. You just encourage the person to pray. Then you get to walk away feeling like you did something without actually putting in the real labor of intervention and care that that person really needs. Sorry if this was too much, but I am now safe. I am so glad to hear that. I left when a queer group in my online D&D DMs helped organize my escape as well as housing. I am so fucking happy. I'm so happy that you had that support system. My paternal grandmother was placed in a home when I was no longer a source of free labor and passed away last year. I couldn't attend her funeral or my sister's wedding, but I'll always be grateful that a group of strangers labeled as sinners, the worst kind in my church's eyes, were the ones who got me out. Needless to say, the experiences of all that opened my eyes to the contrast of promise, love, and peace that caused me to question my faith and prejudices. I'm still working on deconstructing everything, as well as accepting my own queer, neurospicy identity that was always labeled as broken and sinful. My gosh, like between Melody and Jay here, like both of those were such deeply impactful stories. And once again, thank you both for sharing there. And I think I resonate, because like one of the purposes was to talk about like tools and perspectives that can change. And one of them for me was definitely the recognition that secular people may actually come through and support you in a way that your community, your spiritual community, never would. And it's that being willing to be open to the out group that can literally help save you from the in group. And that was something I learned over time, and I'll say to other people who are in the process of leaving, is that you're going to be told that the world is empty, that they don't care, etc., etc. And the reality is, actually, who's actually out there in the secular world are other humans. Humans are social, they are caring, they're nurturing. There's a lot of like unsafe people out there. However, there's a lot of other people who will enthusiastically step up to provide support and will want to be part of your life and affirm you and be there for you and provide practical intervention. Like in the case with this like queer group and D&D group that got you out, where it can literally be the people who are living exactly the opposite of what you've been told is truth and true health, who will actually get you to a place of what is healthier for you. Because like those types of environments where there's abuse and it's profoundly unhealthy, it can literally, like what you literally do need is practical intervention. You need people who are trained, you need people to step up and actually do the right thing, do the interventive thing, literally get you out of it. Because sometimes that is the most practical. Sometimes what you need the most is like, I say this as like somebody who is in an at-risk group of laborers, is that like, I don't necessarily need therapy per se. I don't necessarily need more like individual stuff. I needed food. I needed shelter. I needed community. I needed legal protections. Sometimes there is literally a full, like a baseline of things that needs to be addressed practically. And when you grow up in those environments, they'll basically tell you that the practical things that would literally help keep you safe and give you relief and peace, you're not getting them because it's your fault. And so part of like what is a very helpful perspective change when you're deconstructing from these types of environments is literally grace for yourself. Being gentle with yourself can be the biggest act of self-care when you're coming out of these things, because you are essentially saying, when you give yourself grace, when you give yourself room to fuck up, when you give yourself space to simply be and be functional over perfect, that gives you the room to breathe. It gives you the room to step back from that high demand over self and literally just put that down. Carrying the weight of the responsibility of your safety can really mess you up, because especially if like you're a kid, or like maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a teacher or something else, when a primary caregiver or a primary support doesn't come through, that can really mess you up. And with messages like just pray about it, that basically takes the responsibility and onus of your care from the support system that isn't coming through and puts it back on you. And when you allow gentleness for yourself, you also allow for self-validation, which then can lead to self-advocacy, which can then lead to you using your voice to say, no, I am owed this care. I am supposed to get this care. The way I'm being treated is not okay. I need practical intervention. And the ability to advocate for yourself is a very fundamental skill that I find that like I very much struggle with to this day. But it is like, if I was to say what skill set to best invest in for yourself as you're leaving a high demand over self organization or religion, MLM, whatever have you, whatever manipulative wellness structure you came out of, one of the best things that you can learn to do for yourself is self-advocacy. So I'm going to say thank you very much to those who have submitted today. I got more stories submitted to my email today, so I guess we're going to have a third episode, but I'm going to cut this one here so I don't have an overabundance of editing time. And of course, you guys, make sure you do good things for yourself that make your brain go brrr. I will see you on the next one. Remember to redeem your hydrates, take care of your bodies, and do good things for yourself, because your worth is not your productivity.